This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Gather round your streaming media device, pour yourself a cozy beverage, and curl up with a good podcast. But oh, what to listen to? Well, I recommend this one. We are Things I Found Online, and we are graced today by two spectacular women in multimedia journalism and storytelling, Diane Dimon and Anna Lydia Monaco. Our panel is Lori Roggenkamp, Etta Green, and me, Jamie Alcroft. And now, listen as I artfully toss to our host, Louise Palanker. Weezy.
That was just lovely, Jamie. Thank you.
I ran out of music.
That's okay. We'll fix it in post. Joining us from New York is journalist Diane Dimon. And here in the studio, we have filmmaker Anna Lydia Monaco and my very good friend, Etta Green, who is a young 18-year-old singeress. Or just they call it
Songstress.
nowadays. They just say singer.
I like
yeah.
Oh, singeress? Oh, okay.
I like
singer.
that.
Okay.
Songstress.
I like songstress.
Anna and Diane and Etta are media professionals in a time when our media expectations are ever shifting and different for every individual. Friends and fans may ask you, where can I see that? You may say Amazon Prime. They say, I don't get that. Is it on a DVD? Do I download an app? My phone is full. Should I delete some photos? It's an audiobook. Where do I hear it? Is it on the radio? Do I need headphones? Can you just come over and read it to me, Diane?
Wow.
So many questions.
They say all that stuff.
They say that stuff. Am I right, you guys? That's
You're
what
right.
They
Yeah.
say that to
Yeah.
me.
Were you listening in on my dad's latest conversation? Me and my dad's latest conversation? Because I feel like we had that exact same conversation.
So there's just so many different ways to get content. And what do you guys say to people when they ask you, well, how can I retrieve your latest substantial offering? What do you say, Diane?
I say go to audible.com and type in my name and you will get my latest offering. That's what I say. I mean, it sounds easy, but, I'm not as schooled as you in this stuff. Louise, you know all this stuff.
I know.
And when they go to audio.com, is it?
Audible.
No,
Audible.com, do they hear you or are they able to just read you?
Here you
No, audible.com. Actually, this is new to me too, Jamie.
Okay, this is new.
It's so exciting.
I'm so excited.
I wrote a book and now I just updated the book and we'll talk about that. I wrote some new chapters. And so to get it out to readers fast, you could go the old publishing route, Simon & Schuster, slow. Or you could do what I did, which is go down to my little studio here, read the whole book plus the new chapters into an audiobook. And Audible, I think you join it for, I don't know, $4 a month or something. And then you can download all the audiobooks you want and listen to them using some of these.
Holy moly. $4 a month. That's steep.
Something like that.
It's like $14.95 a month.
Yeah.
But with that,
14, okay.
you get one free book a month, and then you get 20% off all books.
How
and
does
then,
Diane get that deal that she gets?
Yeah,
And you can publish your own book.
And you can well, I don't know if it's for her if she has to subscribe or subscribe. Sorry, I drank before I came
That's
here.
easy for you to say.
If she has to subscribe, but it's I love Audible. It's great. And then also they have these offers that they offer free books. So they'll give you it's called like an Audible book. So they'll give it to you for free. It's sort of like when U2 just sort of downloaded their album on everybody's phone. But
what I have is a houseboy who just follows me around reading to me. It's a little more
And his
expensive.
name happens to be Audible. Audible,
It's
come
like
here.
a literary appetizer. Right?
Exactly.
Bring it to you.
So how do we
Nice.
reach everyone? Anna is a former PR pro turned filmmaker, and of course Diane, my good friend, is an investigative journalist. Both are committed to telling stories, uncovering truths, informing, and enlightening us. And we're going to talk a little bit about your book, Diane, because I know that you're excited that you're out with new chapters. So tell us what's going on with the book. When did you first write it? Why did you write it? And what's available upcoming?
Now you would think that I would have one here to use as a prop, and I don't. It's
I
over
have
there
one
in
somewhere.
the kitchen. Maybe I'll go get one while we're talking.
All
But
right.
anyway, in 2005, I finally wrote down all of my memories and work and source material from covering the Michael Jackson case. I first broke the story in 1993 when I worked for the old TV show Hard Copy, if anybody remembers Hard
Oh,
Copy.
yes.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
there's my book. Thank you
See,
so much.
thanks to the internet, no one has to get up anymore.
I
Ever.
love it. I can just be a chair potato.
I just
So
ordered a
anyway,
Starbucks. I'm staying seated. Go ahead.
I put this out right after the trial verdict, which of course acquitted Michael Jackson. Well, everybody knows, if you've been paying attention, a lot has happened since then.
Mhm.
So I figured it was a good time now to write 4 new chapters, tell people what else I have learned, especially in the wake of that HBO documentary, Leaving Neverland. 2 men came forward and told in graphic detail what Michael Jackson, how he had molested them for years and years when they were children. I wrote about those boys
Jeez.
back in 1993. I wrote about them in that book in 2005. And it was just sort of the impetus for me to give the readers everything else I've learned. And I've learned some pretty startling new stuff.
That's very interesting. And I'm wondering how it affected you to watch those men tell their stories and tell something that you've always known to be true. How did that
Yeah.
feel for you?
Mhm.
Well, gosh, that's a good question. It made me feel sad. I mean, I'll be honest with you. 2019, they're finally revealing what I suspected all along. You know, they were Michael Jackson's special friends at age 7, 8, 9, like that. And they traveled the world with him, mostly unaccompanied, often unaccompanied by their parents. And I just had a sneaking suspicion. So I heard in graphic detail, especially Wade Robson's graphic detail, but Jimmy Safechuck's too, what had occurred between them and Michael Jackson. And I just thought, you know, if society had been capable enough of talking about child molestation back in 1993, maybe some future victims could have been spared. But,
Right.
you know, now it's a Me Too movement time and people are finally listening to this.
And I think what we've
Finally
learned is
talking
that
about it.
what we've learned is that sexual assault victims reveal at their own pace, and there's nothing anyone can do that can hurry that, no matter what kind of testification. What's the word for it? Testimony that you
Testimony.
need. My brain was like, "What's that word that means where you sit on a chair and tell
It's
your?"
also sometimes it just takes a while to come to terms.
Well-
I know somebody that I'm friends with who she was told when she was older that she was molested when she was younger. She has no memory of it whatsoever. And so to this day, she still battles with the fact, like she was like, sometimes I feel like maybe my parents should have just kept that to themselves. And sometimes I feel like I'm happy that I know that. But she, you know, she's completely blocked it out.
It's a very confusing topic when you sexualize a child without allowing them to come to their sexuality on their own timeline, and you interfere with that process. It's very damaging.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the factors that both James and Wade share that may have been a real tipping point for them. And if you watch part 2, Diane, I was really struck by how they had the exact same nervous breakdown. It was so compellingly similar, and both of them had male children. And I think that is what allowed them to differentiate themselves from the child version of them who had been molested. You feel responsible. You feel culpable. If the molester is good, he makes it so that we're doing this. We're in love. We love each other. This is how we express love. We. So you always feel like you were a part of it. And both of them had male children, which allowed them to look at a tiny male person and think, oh my God, I was not responsible for anything that happened to me
Yeah.
as a tiny human.
Yeah, I've only seen part 1. I just haven't had the stomach to watch part 2, but I do notice in part 1, it was Cicely Safechuck is definitely talking about how he was in love with Michael at that point. And it's heartbreaking to see that.
You know, Louise, it's such an odd dynamic, especially with male children.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard for boys to come forward and tell their truth. You know, and many of them don't. They just don't. They go to their graves. We should, you know, the Jackson fans are so quick to say, "Oh, well, where have they been all these years?" And they're just after money, or they're just. have we learned nothing from the Catholic Church
Yeah.
scandal, where these men have come forward 20, 30 years later to finally accuse their priest? It just, as you say, they come to it in their own time. I have a whole chapter in the book with a man named Ken Lanning. He's the FBI agent who wrote the profile of a pedophile for the FBI. And he talks a lot about the child victim. And frankly, some of them, like Wade Robson said, I didn't even realize it was bad. I was told I was in love. This was love. It was good. And oh, by the way, everybody, I don't want to get too graphic, but it feels good. And you're 7 years old and you're told this is the way things are. And so that's the way things are. But as adults, we all know it's not okay. It's a crime.
I have a question. As somebody who is a reporter who's been working on this for many years, how do you sort of like promote this? Like, do you sort of, is at this point, is it word of mouth, or do you have to consistently do interviews to promote your book?
Well, both. I have a presence on Facebook and Twitter. I'm about to close down because the Jackson fans are all over it, and I'm a liar.
I'm so sorry.
A bitch,
My
and I should
goodness.
die. And
Really?
recurring death threats are not unusual. But I've been doing a lot of interviews, and I've been interested that many of them are international.
Really?
I had Australian TV here in my house. I just did something with Paris Match magazine. Esquire magazine, the BBC, the New York Times, so it's a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Twitter, how is that different from when you first reported the trial? Is that because now the fans can like directly go after you, whereas before when you were first reporting, they didn't necessarily have that ability. Did that change things, or?
Honey, how old are you? You see, back in 1993, there wasn't even a computer in my office. There was no Twitter back then.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't Twitter in 1993?
No,
all
there were
right.
groups of crazy fans that would stand outside my office and harass me all the way to my car.
Yeah.
Geez.
That
But
was
as
the Twitter.
internet clicked in, then it really got bad.
The Twitter of the past.
And it's still bad.
So,
Well,
Diane, what I'm wondering is how has the internet impacted how you research and how you go about doing the job of investigative journalism?
Oh, it's so much easier. Oh, my good
Sure.
grief. I mean, if I want to do an article, I write a syndicated column once a week on crime and justice, and I want to do something on, I don't know, people who run red lights. How often do people run red lights and get tickets? I can just plug that into the internet and boom, I've got an answer. I've got several Google research points. It used to be you'd go to the library and look up on, now I'm going to say something that you won't even remember what it is, microfiche.
Microfiche.
You
I
look at
had
the
some
card
microfiche this
catalog,
weekend. It was
forget
good.
it.
Delicious.
I mean, right about now, microfiche would make an excellent band name.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking that
Yeah.
right when she said it.
Jamie, you had a question.
I don't have a question. I just have an observation. I'm interested to see how you react to it. What happens with these victims is they suppress their coming out. They're disclosing that they were abused, and they wait so long that when they do finally disclose that they were abused, people doubt them. Case in point, the Brett Kavanaugh. Who was the woman who accused him in college?
Dr.
What was her name?
Blasey Ford.
Sure, Ford, of course.
Blasey Ford.
And it goes on and on and on that people are accused of being sexual predators, and because they did it so long ago, people don't tend to put much credibility with the into the complaint of that. I mean, I don't know much about the Michael Jackson case. Forgive me, but
I got a book you can read.
did those? Yes, I should have read the book before that, and then I wouldn't have showed up because I'd have known everything. But did those fellows suppress their?
No. They knew exactly. Diane can
their
explain it to you.
information? But they came out about being abused a long time ago. Correct?
Well, I think with Dr. Blasey Ford, it was one incident, and it could be that she said suppressed it. She didn't in this case, but Lori's friend did. But with these boys, this was part of their life. Being friends with Michael Jackson was a huge portion of their
Big
lives.
deal.
Yeah.
So they didn't
For years
suppress
and years,
anything.
yeah.
They just framed it differently.
Yeah, and the one not Safechuck, but right, the other kid, he basically got a career off of Michael Jackson.
He became he
Yeah.
was very talented.
He was very talented, but it opened. But
And
so
still
he
is.
had to frame it in a way that he was like, look, this is a working friendship, and this is what this is just a part of our friendship that happened.
But as opposed to a lot of cases where, you can argue, well, why didn't you say something sooner? In this case, they did say things and they said nothing ever happened. So
Yeah.
he was always calling them when he got into trouble with Jordy, Chandler, or what
Yeah.
have you. He would call them and say, will you take the stand? Will you defend me? And Diane, I should let Diane talk about this. She's the expert. But by way of full disclosure, I was a witness at the 2005 trial and wound up marrying the prosecutor.
I was just gonna say how do you ever go like,
It was quite a single scene.
yeah, in some way, like that Michael Jackson had something to do with you being married and
And
so
happy.
But I look
So-
at it like I give the credit to Gavin.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true,
You
that's
should.
true.
That, give the
Yeah.
credit where credit's due. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a story. You should write a book about that.
But Diane, tell us tell us more about what we were discussing as to what these young men knew and how they carried it with them until it just completely began to crush them.
Yeah. Well, they both told, as you say, a very similar story. They were both special friends of Michael Jackson for years. I mean, in Safechuck's situation, it was 7 years. No, I'm sorry, Robson, it was 7 years. Safechuck maybe even longer than that. But after, how do I put this delicately? After a boy begins to get a little too old, a preferential pedophile, which is what I believe Michael Jackson was, they lose interest. And so all of a sudden, their lives that were consumed with Michael Jackson drops them dead. I mean, he changes his phone numbers. He doesn't talk to them. These young men were crushed. Their best friend suddenly was dissing them, refusing to talk to them. What do you call it? Doxing or something now?
Ghosting. They got ghosted by the King of Pop. It seemed like it wasn't so sudden. It seemed like they'd still be invited over, but then Michael would disappear with a different kid, and he would kind of like do the slow fade where you're no longer in the inner circle. And they actually felt jealous, even though they knew what was going on with the special friend.
Well, I'm sure they felt betrayed, but I mean, these were kids we're talking about here. Where were the parents? What were they doing?
That was another thing. Oh, sorry. You probably have a better answer to that.
Yeah, Diane, what can you say about the parents? Because that's a question that a lot of people ask, especially even after watching Leaving Neverland.
Yeah. I think that the agent I talked about, the FBI agent, Ken Lanning, explained it best to me many years ago, because I'm a mother. It's like, where the heck were the parents? I'm with you, Jamie. And his answer was, you have to remember that a pedophile is the most cunning, personable, friendly, crafty criminal you will ever encounter. And they deliberately manipulate. If you watch the Leaving Neverland documentary, you see how these mothers were manipulated, and they literally seduce the parent first. They seduce them to the point where they are trusted, and then they have a beeline path to the kid. So I know that answer doesn't satisfy a lot of people, but if you are constantly in a position where, say, you're a single mother, perfect target for a pedophile.
Mm-hmm.
And the man comes to the door and says, hey, listen, I'm the scoutmaster, I'm the priest, I'm the postman, whoever it is. And I know there's no man in the house, but I'd love to take your son fishing. The mother says, oh, what a great male bonding thing to do. Of course you can take little Billy fishing and camping. And for that overnight weekend. And to go see your brother in Oklahoma. And so your son has a chance to widen their circumstance, and you get a little bit of a break. So see how a mother can be seduced into thinking, wow, there's a male grown-up that really wants to help me.
And
Well,
additionally,
that's not what they want to do at all.
and in this case, or in this scenario, additionally, the moms were a little bit in love with Michael Jackson being their best friend. So he had less grooming to do since he comes into the picture already frickin' Michael Jackson.
Huge, famous.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm the friendly postman who fishes and bowls. It's like I'm Michael Jackson. Like you don't
Yeah.
have
Do
to.
you want to go to London with me?
The
on my
allure.
private jet?
Yeah,
Is
there's
so powerful.
there's a giraffe and a merry-go-round, and I'm Michael Jackson.
I'd give them my kids.
So that's I think what happens to the parents is they
To pet a giraffe?
A giraffe?
they don't see him as being it being remotely
A danger.
possible that this person could
Well,
could present a danger to my child.
You never think about that. I mean, I watch most of the shows I watch are shows about murder. And
Lori's hobby is murder. Well, I mean,
My-
and you
my
and
kind of
Diane,
girl.
you have a lot to talk about because Diane is an investigative journalist, so she knows
yeah.
a lot about
That
a lot
is-
of murders.
I
It's
would
really
love
not a hobby as much as it is an avocation.
It's a
Yeah,
passion.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
passion.
But
She dabbles.
But I feel like I would be the perfect victim because even though I watch like 1,000 murder shows, there's nobody in my life that I feel like would have that capacity. Now, as what I've been learned from watching 1,000 murder shows is that possibly everybody in my life
You
has
never
that
know.
capacity. So,
But aren't there red flags though, right,
there are a
Diane?
huge amount of red flags, but have you ever been in a relationship? It's not like when you do hindsight. I've been in relationships where hindsight, it's like a red flag ship that's on fire and also trailing poop. Like it's just like you're like, why did I fall for that? But then you realize when it happened, it was like a little thing here that was explained, a little thing here that was explained, a little thing here, and it all leads up to this big thing. And
Well,
so,
when you're in love, you see less of those red flags. Like
Yeah.
if you're watching The Bachelorette, Luke P has probably killed people.
oh, he is a psychopath. He's going to
So-
be on Dateline.
Well,
I am
people-
almost
Go ahead.
positive about that.
Well, people just trust famous people. They don't.
Right?
No one knows them. You know, people just out of nowhere just will trust them because they're in the public eye. You don't know them, but you feel like you do.
Yeah.
And they
So
want
it's
Yeah, you
like-
feel like
yeah.
they've passed a lot of FBI screenings just by virtue of their fame.
Because exactly.
Another good documentary is Abducted in Plain Sight. Have you guys seen
Right,
that?
Yeah.
Diane,
Yes.
have you seen that?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is one that's not like
Yeah.
Have
about
you seen that,
famous
Anna?
people.
I have.
No, it's like he's just so charming, and I can't believe he wants to be our friend. Has anyone
Jan.
seen Jan? She was here a week ago.
How is that normal? How is that normal? How is that real life?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, my mom used to tell me that her grandma would say, like, basically just be like, check in with me Tuesday.
Oh.
Like, she would be like, do what you need to do, but just check in with me, like sometime later this week. So I think that back in the day, things were a little more lax. My mom would follow me to the bathroom.
Same.
So,
Same. Check on every call.
Yeah.
It was impossible.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be run and play and come home when it's dark.
Yeah.
And nothing happened to us. Like, we were fine. It's just that now that you know more about what could go wrong, you're less inclined to let your kid... Like, Diane, did you let your daughter just ride her bike around the neighborhood?
Well, way back then, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did. But it was a tiny little community and I knew everybody and my head was always out the door. The neighbor lady was out the door, and certainly not after dark and not for very long. But I don't think I was one of those helicopter parents, but my daughter is.
Is she? And do you
I think
think
it's
there...
at the time, sign of the times.
Are there more crimes being committed, or are we just better informed about what could go wrong?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think we're more people on the planet and more demented, evil, weird people that wind up on Investigation Discovery Channel, where I do a lot of crime reporting. So I think we're just by virtue of the fact that there are more and more people in the world, we hear about more and more crimes. And there's all this media out here and the internet and,
I have a question for you because for the life of me, can't remember her name. I wish I could. But there was a woman who is an investigative journalist, and she was saying that she feels like the podcasts that talk about that quote unquote that investigate murders or talk about a series of murders actually do a disservice to investigative journalism, because they're basically taking the work that journalists have done and kind of like compounding it and then regurgitating it. And so it's not necessarily the same format, that it's not what these people have put out, what they wanted to be put out, but it's just it's how they're reinterpreting it in their way. Do you think that it's like better that we have all different ways to showcase this kind of stuff, like different versions of this, like podcasts about murder or podcasts about investigating, like TV shows, all that stuff? Or do you think it's actually hurting investigative journalism?
Yeah, no, I would have to disagree. That journalist sounds like they're worried about the competition.
I wish I knew her name.
The more information out there, the better. It is my job as an investigative journalist, and her job, whoever the heck she is, to determine whether or not what's out there is true. So if I report something about Michael Jackson and I put it in a book, and someone does a podcast and they misquote something I wrote or something I discovered, well, that's not good. But I'm not for censorship at all. And I think the more information out there, for the most part, the better.
Before we break for a commercial, Diane, I have one quick question. Do you hear from a lot of sleuthy ladies?
I do. If you look at my friends list, I have 2 Facebook pages. It's full of sleuthy lady, Love and ID, Investigation Discovery Channel people.
Yeah, I love that. And it's
like there's my cat. She's not supposed to be.
Hi, pretty.
That's Libby. That's Libby.
It's a lovely community, isn't it? They feed off of each other and encourage you. I think do you think it makes women feel safer, the concept that they could be solving crimes?
Well, maybe that's it. I think women are awfully collegial anyway. But let me tell you something. There's some old sleuthy ladies, like me, old sleuthy ladies, who have really done some great stuff. And one of them, I can't think of her name right now. She had been a lawyer, and she decided to start doing genealogy studies. And this woman is the one who came up with this system out of the blue, because she just started studying it, because she was a sleuthy lady, to do genealogical tree searches. And she's the one who found the Golden State Killer.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
she
so
figured out the system, and Parabom has adopted it and solved a whole bunch of crimes by using her
Was
system.
that Patton Oswalt's late wife, or was she the one who wrote the book?
No. I know. She's the one who wrote the book.
Barbara Ray Ventnor.
That's her, Barbara Ray Ventnor. Her backstory is fascinating.
Wow.
And she was just, a sleuthy lady.
That's amazing. Okay, we're going to break for commercial really quickly, and we will be right back in a minute.
You won't find a better quantum physicist than Dr. Graw Horatio.
How do you do? I am Dr. Graw Horatio, a scientist.
However, like many of us, he's useless without a good cup of coffee.
Thanks to coffee, I can accomplish more in a week than a regular scientist can in a month, with just as many psychotic breakdowns. It's quite economical in the long run.
You can hear Dr. Horatio and his exciting adventures in the upcoming radio comedy, Magus Elgar.
Visit MagusElgar.com to download your copy today.
For all the latest NASCAR content, including driver interviews, race recaps, fantasy NASCAR, listener call-ins, and giveaways, tune in weekly to the Lap Traffic Podcast on iTunes or your favorite hosting site, on the web, thelaptrafficpodcast.com, and on Twitter @LapTrafficPC. Don't get caught chasing the lucky dog. Tune in each and every week to the Lap Traffic Podcast.
Here in the studio with us is PR specialist turned filmmaker, Anna Lydia Monaco. She's 3 names strong. Yay! A natural storyteller, Anna Lydia spent summers in Mexico where she never felt Mexican enough, and the school year in America where she never felt American enough. She has used marketing, photography, blogging, and film to tell her unique stories and highlight our universal human similarities. And we have her IMDb page, if you would click there, gentlemen. And her bio. Can you tell us a little bit about the stories you are inspired to tell?
Well, going back to film school was basically because of the lack of representation, mostly of women and women of color, specifically Latinas. So after complaining for years and years that I didn't see people like myself, or the people that I saw, you know, they lived in East LA, or they were blue collar, they weren't college educated, they weren't professional. How is it possible that someone like myself and like my friends and like my family doesn't have a place in media? We actually exist. So I went on a Facebook rant, and I did it several times over until I was told, well, just go to film school. And on a dare, even though I was already telling stories for my clients like Macy's and Disney and others, said, let me apply to film school. Let me go back to school and see if I can actually do this. And I did. I actually got into several film schools, and I took the chance and the opportunity to go into Art Center College of Design, where I focused.
One of the best.
Thank you. Where I really, I went in there and I was very adamant about the representation of women, specifically Latinos in media, and that I wanted to tell dramedies, and that I really wanted to focus on direct-to-consumer, such as Netflix, because Hulu and Amazon and all that didn't exist. And this is only literally 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, right.
This is how quickly everything happened. So did not take any time off, went straight to school, pretty much quit PR, social media, that my paid work, kept blogging just as an extra added interest because I love art and culture, and that's part of who I am, and went 150% into film school to really develop my portfolio, because I knew that I was not your traditional film school student. I'm not 20 years old. So when you go back to school, you have to have a goal. And my goal is I want to have a quality portfolio when I get out of here. So I can meet with managers, meet with agents, meet at, high level executives, and they know that my work is of quality and it already has a tone and a voice and a point of view that they can then stick me in a show or give me an opportunity to work with their clients or with themselves or at the studio. So everything I do is always with the intent of highlighting people of color, specifically Latinos, and dramatic roles. Also dramatic horror, thrillers, those types of things. That's where I feel that there's a lack of representation mostly.
Don't look around. Just keep your mouth right in front of the microphone. You're gonna be happier in the long run.
It's tough.
It's tough. I know.
So tough.
I know, because Jamie's so handsome. But if you need to look at people, you can look at people by pivoting around your microphone.
You can definitely tell
go.
you're a
It's like a dance.
storyteller because you want to make sure you get like everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody sees you.
Inclusive.
Give us an
Yeah.
example of some of the films that you've made.
Well, one of the films that has actually won some awards, some audience awards, it's called Meeting Brown, and it was inspired on my relationship with my husband. He's a white male, I'm a Latina, and of course, being the first person of color in his family, and for a lot of his friends, the only Latinos that they ever came across were the neighbors, the maid, the gardeners, and then they met me, and they would say the most inappropriate things that they thought was really and they thought it was really funny. That's the thing, like they really thought it was funny, and I'd look at them like, oh my God, this came out of your mouth. Like,
and what's an example? Because I think a lot of white people have no idea what they're saying half the time.
Oh, they're crazy, those white people.
Well, it was funny because I didn't have I had unlimited jokes, when people are write jokes and they're like, how about this joke and this joke and this joke? I had literally 100 of examples of microaggressions that had been said in my face.
What's a microaggression? Explain and then describe.
Not an outright act of racism. So it's you're so good looking for a Latina. You do not look like you don't look like a Latina. You don't have an accent. Those are all microaggressions.
Okay.
Oh, you probably know where the best tacos are at. Why?
Also ignorance. There's another word for that.
I understand that. The best tacos and you're good looking for a Latina and all that. That's terrible. That's ridiculous. But when people comment, I'm a dialectician and I love accents and I thrive on accents and I make my living doing accents and as a voiceover actor. Now, I adore accents. I actually treasure them. They're luxurious to me. In terms of, really, I listen to them and I revel in them. So if I were to say to you, you have a wonderful accent, is that micro?
It would be
because
offensive, especially if you do not have an accent or you're from Los Angeles, where all of our cultures have intermingled.
Wait a minute now.
Yeah.
Right, if I said you have a lovely accent, it's incredible. It's bloody awful.
I also think it's the context of it.
The context of it as well. Yeah.
I think it's like because I'm gay, and when people go like, when people are like, oh, if you, femmed up a bit, and I'm like, femmed up a bit.
What do you
Thanks,
mean by
Deb.
that?
Yeah.
What do I mean? I'm not good enough
Like,
the way I am.
I don't understand.
Who would say that to you? I don't know.
My father.
Yeah, there's people that say
okay.
things like that, and it might sound like, oh, it's no big deal, it's just a joke, I meant it well. But when you hear it over and over again, and it's one thing over another, and then there's a lack of representation. And for example, Art Center College of Design has a huge population of international students, and all the movies they saw were like gang portrayals, people that were in rap musicians, or they were maids, or they were prostitutes. So they come to the U.S. Their first surprise is like, oh wait, you're not a maid, you're not a gang member. And media representation matters, because even outside of me caring about how I am seen, it actually makes other people treat me in a certain way, even outside of my own community, even international students that I was like, no, you can't say that. You can't do that. And they don't know. And I would say that a lot of people actually don't know. But if you don't know by now, and you live in Southern California, you live in a major urban community, if you're in Vancouver, if you're in Toronto, Chicago, New York, like the major urban hubs in this country, in Canada, Jesus Christ, are you blind? Because it's an issue.
I'm going to ask like a stupid white person question.
Yeah.
Is it okay to ask your server or your Uber driver what country they were born in?
Why would you want to know?
Because fascinating. Because their accents are fascinating.
Because I'm interested.
And they're human beings.
I'm interested.
Because
we're the same species. We want to know about each other.
Okay, does a white person
report them? And have them taken.
Yeah, like why? I mean, I don't care.
We gotta be funny,
it's too crowded.
Yeah, I don't care like where a white person is from. So why would you?
But if you're not from here, then I'm interested in where you're from and what your life is like.
Why?
Because I'm curious about people. So you're saying that's a microaggression?
I'm saying it doesn't matter, that I should be treated like a human being. Would you go to another white person and ask them where are you from?
If they have an accent,
I do.
If they have an accent, or like there's a girl that I work with at school that she had a British accent, and so like literally everybody globbed onto her to be like, "Where are you from? How do you like in America?" And I think it got eventually tiresome for her, but
it does.
But it was like still like people they flow to like what they're not accustomed to. Even people, we have Asian teachers, we have Hispanic teachers. Everybody was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. We usually don't have a white person with an accent in Your Belinda. So,
But a person should be treated with humanity, regardless of what they look like,
Absolutely.
regardless of whether or not they have an accent, unless it's part of the conversation or there's a genuine interest. And again, going back to intention, like what is your intention behind the ask? And somebody might not know what your intention is, because you don't know if every single white male has been scary to this younger girl from Guatemala. So you don't know what the intention is or how she perceives it. So if you just out of curiosity, because I'm really interested in your accent, because I am working on developing as a voice actor a Guatemalan accent. That's safe. That's good. But always ask. Treat someone with humanity.
So should I say? May I ask where you're from?
Also, can I answer your question and say that I think in general you should never talk to your Uber driver.
Okay.
I just don't. I think that opens up a can of worms,
right?
That you don't want to get into
because they're lonely.
They probably get sick of the question. Like if I lived somewhere else and people were always asking me because I have an accent, where are you from? I might get sick of the question. But for me, it's a way to start a conversation with someone who I'm interested in the half hour that we're going to be spending together and learning about their culture.
Something that white people don't understand, I think, is that people of color are sometimes forced to do additional emotional work.
Labor.
Yes. That, a white man or woman, for that matter, just isn't aware of. And so, like Anna is saying, when you are saying something that seems completely innocuous about a person's appearance or the way they speak or whatever, you don't know how many times they've had to deal with that unwarranted.
Right.
So and so it's like they're tired.
Right.
And what were you going to say, Diane?
Actually,
it's hard for Diane to get in because she's on the Zoom.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm enjoying listening to the conversation, but I must say that Anna's first response was, "No, you can't ask people where they're from," meaning that our almost casting aspersions on the reason why we would be asking. And I'm like you, Louise. I hop in the car and I go, "Hey, hi. Oh, where are you from? I've never been there. Tell me about the place."
But if you
ask
only
it
ask
from a place of pure curiosity and wanting to have a conversation with another human being, not as a microaggression.
I get your intention, but would you ask the same question to somebody white?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. We could say, where do you live?
I had a camera crew here in my house today from ABC 2020. We were doing a completely different type of story. And there were 4 guys. And I said to the Asian looking cameraman, I said, "Hey, Russ, where are you from? Tell me about yourself." And he said, "Oh, well, I'm from Washington Heights, which is near Harlem. And I'm a former Marine." And then we started talking about military service. And I use that as a conversation starter, and that people would think it's a microaggression to say.
I think that we're sharing.
I think that's overreacting.
No,
I really do.
I think that when someone of color tells you this is offensive and I don't appreciate it, it's not a matter of overreacting. It's a matter of like, oh, let me sit back and listen. Like, I didn't mean it that way, but let me sit back.
Well, that would be your
listen.
reaction, yes. But it's an easy mistake to make if you're reaching out to a fellow human being just out of curiosity.
But
mean, I would ask a white person that. I would ask a white woman, a white man.
Let me ask a question. Like in the other studio in New York,
understand that.
Did you ask every other person that came with the crew where they were from?
I sure did. I sure did. Yeah.
Because if
Nestor is from Mexico, and so I talked to him about my being from New Mexico, and the other kid, Gabe, was from Brooklyn, and the same neighborhood where my husband grew up.
That's
so
great.
I got to know all of them.
That's great that you did, and it's wonderful, and it's actually a really, like you said, conversation piece. But if you're in the room and nobody else is of color, and you're the only person being asked, "Where are you from?" it stands out. It really does.
Well,
you might mean it in a very friendly way. You might not mean it in a negative way.
Then how about changing it? How about changing it? Where do you live?
Oh, what do you mean? Where do I live?
Like, instead of saying where are you from, asking where you live.
Yeah, where do you live?
Oh, I normally, when I start conversation, what do you do? Where are you from?
But how about where do you live? That's okay.
Why? Why do you want to?
Because
especially as a woman, that is scary. I don't tell people where I live.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we live in a scary world.
I think it's just. I think it's
we
one of
don't
those
live there.
things.
I don't live in that world.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where it's just, again, like she was saying, you don't understand where the other person's coming from. So I'm not necessarily. I don't necessarily feel like what you're saying is you don't have the wrong intentions. But I think what she's trying to say is look, like for her, that question is not necessarily something she thinks is appropriate.
I know. I think, look, I've been married to a woman of color for 34 years. Okay, we went to a party one night, and a friend of mine came up to me and said, "Oh, your wife is just beautiful. What is she? Is she Korean? Is she Japanese? Is she Chinese?" Which is what you're talking about here. You know, and I said, "Gosh, I don't know. Let me get back to you." No, I pretended like I didn't know. And I said, "Listen, Jimmy,
it never came up.
I'll get back with you. Let me get back with you on that." So a half hour later, I circled back to him at the party, and I said, "She's Japanese. I had no idea." Thank you.
But let me ask you this question.
That's just how silly that is.
And I'm honoring what you're saying, and I want to learn from it. But let me ask you this question: would a person from Sweden who has an accent, if I asked her where are you from, just based on her accent, would she also be like, "Oh, are we doing this?"
I don't know. I can't speak for Swedish people. Just like I told you about the colorism documentary I made, I cannot speak for Black women. I can't speak for Asian women. I can only speak for myself and my culture.
For yourself, though. Can you speak for your entire culture?
And I can speak as a Latina how offensive it is to be asked in a room, singled out where I am from, when nobody else is being asked. If everybody else in the room is "Oh, where are you from, where you came from," then it's part of a larger conversation.
But me personally, I wouldn't ask you that because you don't have an accent. obviously you're American, so I might say, what part of town do you live in? But I wouldn't say. It's usually if I hear an accent and I assume their childhood took place someplace else, that I find that interesting. Like, what was your childhood like? And
I get that. But again, if you're singled out, it is offensive to a lot of people.
I hear you.
Now, you might not mean it that way. And I'm not saying you do mean it that way.
I understand what you're saying.
But if somebody else is being singled out, it is offensive.
And you know what my fear is? My fear is that it's going to separate us more than we already are. If we create a culture where we can all talk to each other comfortably. Can I finish?
Sure.
Where we can talk to each other without somehow offending or stepping over a certain line. If we're always worried about stepping over lines with people, we're never really going to come together as a species, as humanity, as a world community. And that's what we need to do. We need to stop putting up these barriers, I think, and start tearing them down.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of people that feel that way, Jamie, but I think that, I don't think that we're doing any harm by listening to people when they speak their truth.
I'm listening.
And learning from it and always being aware of our privilege, right?
Yeah.
So if you have privilege as a man, as a white person, I think it's really important to check that, to be aware of it and be aware of.
Yeah.
I don't have privilege. I don't have privilege being a white man. I have shame. I have shame.
Okay, well, that's good too.
I have shame.
You don't have to have shame.
Do you guys?
I don't think shame helps anybody. Honestly, I don't think shame helps anybody.
No.
I think it inhibits us and it prevents us from taking a step forward.
Well, there you
from
go.
listening and saying, okay, the next time I'm in a cab, my first thing shouldn't be the question this person gets asked the most often.
Like you said,
Wait till it comes
what do
up
you
to
do?
conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like, what do you do?
Right.
I bought a
How are
romp
you?
one time to wear to a swim party, and I feel like shame was the right amount of thing to have for that. So I think that helped me learn not to do that again.
I think that if anything, the situation that we're in right now, and without having to talk about politics and everything else, because everybody feels very differently, is that we should take a step back and understand that people see the world differently. Their experiences are differently. To not be on the defensive, like, oh no, I don't mean it that way. It's like, no, we're not asking you what you mean. Just take a step back, listen. Don't have a response right away.
I think
just
that's
listen.
good advice.
Maybe
Don't have a response right away. Just listen. Listen that our experience as someone of color is going to be very, very different, especially if you're visibly someone of color, regardless if I have an accent or not. I mean, I'm called ethnically ambiguous because people don't know what I am. That is my privilege. If I was a brown or a black presenting woman, if I was a lesbian presenting woman, if I was, someone else that visibly had less of a privilege than I did, absolutely have to listen to their experiences as well. We have to take a step back.
I agree.
We have a privilege. I'm married to a white guy. He has way more privilege than I do. And he's become more cognizant of that since marrying me, of like, oh, shoot, like, I'll look at a panel, everybody's a white guy. Like, I'll look on TV and, oh my God, everything is from a male point of view.
Well,
it's like, literally, we just watched Rami. I don't know if everybody saw Rami. One of the most incredible shows on television. White guy, Latina. We're like, oh my God, this is great, because we saw the life and perspective of a first generation immigrant Muslim guy, which was great. And then he went to Egypt to visit his family, and we're like, this is it? It's over? Like, they better bring this back. Bring it back, Hulu, please. We want to see this show. But that's the thing. All you have to do is take a step back, understand your privilege. Understand your privilege as a male. You obviously have way more privileges than women, regardless of your nationality. A male has more. Someone that is white has more. Someone that's white presenting has more. And we have to own it and be like, we do. How can we use our privilege to advance the voices of people that don't have the same privileges that I have? For example, me going to film school, huge privilege. Huge. Having over $100,000 in student loans, and the school literally telling me, we know you're going to be able to pay it off. Like, it's not a problem. That's a huge privilege, because there's a kid right now in Van Nuys that's probably a better filmmaker than I am, maybe a better writer, that will never step foot at Art Center, that will never step foot at USC, because they don't have the same privileges that I do.
But they
so it's
will. But they will.
We hope.
We know. They
No,
will.
there's
what
so
are we
many
here
ki-
for if they won't?
We hope.
What are we here
We
for?
hope.
What
I
are we
cannot
doing
say
all this stuff
100% of these kids will go to those type of schools.
No,
and it's
but-
our responsibility, I feel, that as a woman, brown woman with privilege, to help the next generation, to make sure that the stories I tell highlight the people that need it the most, that are not represented in media. That's why I went back to school.
I think
and
that's
this
great.
is why I put myself in a huge debt, because it was more than a dare. This is my life mission, because I've already done it for Macy's, I've done it for Disney, I've done it for others. I've made a really good career in PR, and I can go back to it tomorrow and make a really good living. But instead, I've decided, you know what? There's a lot of people whose voices, whose stories, whose look, just the Vida television, like who has ever seen a Latina lesbian? Like that's huge.
Right.
That is huge.
I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
I actually have two questions. Do you want us to save this footage for you for your inevitable documentary? Where are you from? And then my second question is, you mentioned way earlier about you are striving to do more things direct to consumer. Now, I feel like, and I don't know what you think. Do you think that by I think so many people are doing direct to consumer because it's so much easier to do direct. Well, in my opinion, it's so much easier. But do you think that maybe there is an argument to try and go on like basic cable and try and push for that? Because I think that still, in my opinion, middle America, most of them still watch basic television shows. And so to get true representation, I feel like you need to show it on all platforms.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I'm just using that as an example that when I got into Art Center, that was my intention. Like, let me get into Netflix. I think this is where the best stories for this type of content will be able to exist. And Netflix has proven that. I mean, On My Block, one of the most diverse shows on television, one of my most favorite shows right now as well. If you don't see it, you have to see it. It's
called
On My Block.
Anna,
Netflix.
What about Mr. Iglesias?
Actually, we started watching
My
it.
friend Peter Marietta,
Yeah.
who used to produce Wizards of Waverly Place.
Oh, I never saw that. Yeah.
He Latino, and he is very, very adamant about bringing this Latino
good
male.
show.
It's a funny show.
I was gonna actually
good
talk
show.
about that because they did a whole episode about Latinx.
That very good show.
So I was wondering, is that a new thing? Is that a new push or?
Okay, so very traditional Latinos, close your ears right now if you're listening.
What about, I'm an inbred Anglo-Saxon. What do I do?
Very traditional Academia Española type of Latinos will say there's only Latinas and Latinos. That is it. However, that excludes people that are gay, that are lesbian, that are bi, that are transgender.
Really?
So Latinx has become, I don't want to say catch-all because that's almost offensive, but it's more inclusive to a lot more categories. However, know that most people that are using it are a lot younger and a lot more liberal, and people are very upset. Like the older Hispanics from Miami are very upset. We're Hispanic. You know, the older Chicanos from LA is like, no, we're Latinos and Latinas and we shouldn't even change that. But someone that's a little younger, progressive, that wants to be inclusive to our gay, lesbian, bi, transgender, non-binary, friends and family, we use Latinx. I freely use Latinx. It took me a while, but I freely use it because I don't want to exclude anyone. When I'm referring to a Latino,
It's easy to say.
It's easy.
Latinx.
Well, some people
Latina.
say it's not. So, I mean, you can read up on it. There's tons of information out there about it.
I like saying it because it sounds like a Hispanic superhero team. So
I'm Latinx.
Yeah.
Can you
I'm Latinx.
describe an online tribe and how you cultivate one?
Well, the thing is, within the online world, as we know, this is being live streamed on Facebook. So there's different areas or different social media networks you can go into. You can go to Instagram, there's TikTok, there's Facebook, there's Twitter. Each one of these networks has a particular goal and type of, I don't want to say consumer, but type of audience that you have. So depending on what you're doing. So if you're an art photographer or architecture photographer, if you're like an Instagram model, well, Instagram is your place. Like that is a really good, strong place for you to build your community.
Thank you for noticing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a really strong place. If you're like middle America, middle age, mom, dad, Facebook is your place. You know, TikTok, a lot younger, probably under 14. Twitter has become my home. That's a home for filmmakers, for writers, for screenwriters. The WGA Solidarity Challenge literally sprouted on Twitter. That's where a lot of the different lists that are being passed around town were created by some WGA writers, non-WGA writers. So there's WGA lists for African Americans, for Asian, for women, for men, for all, for non-WGA, Latino non-WGA. I'm on several of those lists, and just based on those lists, I've gotten meetings. Like really
That's
big,
amazing. That's
great.
really big meetings. I've met some incredible friends just off of that. I think that Facebook is a really good place, at least for me, in private groups. Like there's filmmaker private groups or podcasts.
I really like Facebook groups. I feel like
yeah.
that's where Facebook is moving towards. As I mostly do Facebook groups now.
Not the public on your Facebook page stuff.
I pretty much have unfollowed everybody.
Oh my God, me too. I had like 5,000 people a year ago, and I unfollowed 4,700 of them.
Yeah, I unfollowed most people.
It hurt.
It hurt a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of people got like
see,
super
you don't
upset.
know. You don't
And
know that I
I
unfollowed
bore
you.
the brunt of that.
Now, I want to take a moment to introduce Etta, who's on the verge of adulthood and presenting herself as a young artist. Can you describe what would be your
both things
tribe,
are
or
exciting.
where you're at that age where you're kind of figuring out who you are and where you want to go, and also how you want to present yourself as an artist. So, what you're coming to in terms
Where
of
are you from?
Yeah, where are you
From New York.
And where are you heading? I think is a good question. For an
She
18-year-old.
she has a New York accent. I knew that.
Oh, I think I have, people have pointed out to me I have a Rochester.
Rochester.
Yeah, even though I
I'm from
only lived
Buffalo.
there for
These
about
guys
2
are all
years.
from RIT.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Buffalo girl. Buffalo girl coming out tonight. Go ahead. Take it away. Who are you and where are you going?
Well, going on the social media topic, my one thing right now that's really prevalent in my career and me moving forward is you have to, I'm that person that's like, I hate social media. I don't want to be on it. I don't want to do anything on it. I don't want to promote myself. I want to I just do it, I'll do my craft and then it'll all just which is not
let my art
realistic.
speak for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, for the past 5 years, I've realized that, that's not really a thing that can happen. So you got to really, put yourself out there.
Like it or not.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm at the point, I'm creating a lot of music that I, for the first time, actually love. So that's a really great place that I'm in. And I'm at a point where, I work and stuff, but I can really focus 100% on my music because I'm not in school right now and I'm just doing that. So it's, it's been a bit of a challenge, navigating through the whole social media world and that's why I was super interested when you said she was, from social media PR because it's being able to put yourself out there in a way that isn't, hey, go like and comment on my last post and seeming kind of I want this fake interaction, but then turning it into real interaction.
Well,
is,
your fans are the ones that will share your work. It was so many people that actually included me on these lists without me having to be added
Is
to
that
list.
a Twitter list? When people add you to it?
Yeah, there's a ton of Google lists. But for you as a musician, as a singer, as a writer, there's so much opportunity to work with indie filmmakers.
Yeah.
If you reach out to, especially women filmmakers, they're always looking to work, whether they're female musicians and composers, and you can trade off services and suddenly you have a video, you have a music video. Your song is included in the credits of a song. You might not make any money, but how you
just
use
putting yourself out
Right.
there. That's
yourself
kind
out
of the
there.
point.
Filmmakers who need music. There are filmmakers who need to shoot a music video for
Hit me
their
up.
reel.
No,
Let
me know.
There are artists who need each other to create, and so you find those groups.
You find your tribe, you find your
tribe.
you find your community, and you trade off services. I am not one of those people that say you got to get paid all the time. However, there are times when you do have to get paid for your work, and I hate saying your worth because how you're measured is completely different. But you do have to get paid for your work, regardless of what it is. However, and I don't want to call it exposure, but the opportunity to trade your music in the in exchange of being in the end credits of this song from this director, this producer that has one day was actually produced an award-winning film. Well, suddenly, if you're smart, you'll be able to use that opportunity to promote your own work, to then get paid work, because that's literally how I started doing social media. Because when social media didn't exist, I did it for free. Like I would add it on to my contracts with Macy's, and I'd be like, give me the opportunity to do social media for this, and say I did social media for you, and then suddenly started getting more and more and more work doing that. I would also say, like, do something with nonprofits, non-government organizations. Like, there's so many opportunities out there. You do something, they do something for you. So I did something for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, got paid peanuts because it's a nonprofit. They were so happy with my results. They asked me, what can we do to support you? Because obviously they weren't going to pay me more. I said, introduce me to all of your sponsors. That's how I got Macy's.
Networking. And
that's smart. So like, you have to be very strategic. Like, I'm not going to tell, you need a resume to get work. That's
that's what it's kind of becoming, is like people, you know, in meetings and stuff, it's like, oh, what's your Instagram? And that's kind of like your resume. All of a sudden it's like, hey, you know, this is, you know, like putting stuff out there and being strategic. Like, this is who I am. This is, you know, what I'm doing, and hoping, you know, people catch on, and getting people to, you know,
well, it's not even that hoping people catch on. It's like, who are these people?
Going out there. And
because that was one of the things I did, because I still get paid to do social media campaigns a lot. Like, I literally turn clients away because I don't have time. I'm a filmmaker. But one of the things that they notice is that I might not have thousands upon thousands of followers, but all of my followers are of quality, and they follow through with what I'm putting out there. So, for example,
Diane, did you have? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you have something to offer, Diane?
Yeah, I would like to ask, I'd like to hear more from Etta about where do I find her on the vast World Wide Web? Is she on Facebook? Is she, because
I'm on everything.
I don't know anything about you. I'd like to learn more.
Everything I'm on is just, it's Etta Green X. That's my username. EDA Green without an E and an X.
Can you talk briefly to us, Diane, about your experiences breaking out as a female journalist in probably what was a male-dominated world when you began, and what you ran into?
It was indeed. I mean, I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, so I'm delighted that Anna's doing more things about Latinos, because I was a minority in a lot of my youth. There were more Latinos than there were Irish Catholics in Albuquerque at the time. But
did they ask you where you were from?
What's that?
Did they ask you where you were from?
And I said, Albuquerque. Yeah, I didn't care. Anyway, I was the only woman in the newsroom at KOB, a big 50,000 watt radio station there. Then I was at KGGM first, only woman in the newsroom. KOB Radio, only woman in the newsroom. Then I jumped to National Public Radio in Washington, and there was another woman in the newsroom. Her name was Jackie Judd. She's a dear, sweet person. She went on to work for ABC. She's retired now. But over the years, and I've been at this a long, long time, as you know, Louise, I've seen more and more women come into the field of journalism. Until now, you know, I think it's pretty even. Look at 60 Minutes. It's kind of split, women and women. Look at 2020. It's split, men and women. And so I'm heartened by that. I'm much more worried about the state of journalism and what's become of, you know, the fake news.
Right.
But, you know, look, you find your passion, like Etta's got a passion, Anna's got a passion, and you follow it. And, and that's where you find your happiness. You may not find wealth, but you find it.
What are some of the things that men would say to you that bugged you when we're talking about questions that kind of rub people the wrong way? What are some of the things that they would say to you, and what do you wish you had known now to say in response?
No. That's what I wish I had learned to say. You know, it wasn't, of course, you always got are you seeing anyone? Right. Are you married? What's your status? What's my status?
What does that even mean?
That's my status. You know, after the Me Too movement broke, my husband, Michael, who has been a radio anchorman for CBS, just recently retired after about 40 years with CBS stations. And he's also a voiceover artist, Jamie.
Oh, good.
We were out on our morning walk, and I revealed to him some of the things that happened to me as a young reporter, radio reporter, specifically in Albuquerque, not at NPR so much, but in Albuquerque especially. And being in an elevator and slammed up against the wall and suddenly someone's tongue is in your mouth.
Oh my God.
I mean, I never thought to say no. I got flustered and I ran away. But what I should have done was give him one of these.
Right.
And say, don't you ever do that again.
Right.
I learned to do that pretty quickly. But in the beginning, it didn't dawn on me that I had the right to say
that. Yeah.
Do you have good knees, Diane? Do you have good knees?
I have great knees. And
Good.
great
Use those. Use those. That's the most effective. That's the most effective.
We used to think like, oh, well, I don't want to embarrass him. He must have thought that this was a date. Like we always thought that we were doing something that brought that on.
Well, the thing is, and you also think like, I'm not going to have this opportunity again.
Right.
Like I'm not going to have this job. I'm not going to be able to work in this town again.
Right.
So you stay quiet. You might tell a few of your close friends, but you really don't spread news about anyone because you don't want to be blackballed. You don't want to be blacklisted.
You don't want to be seen as difficult.
You don't want to be seen as difficult, especially as a woman of color. It's like there's way more weight put on that type of work when you're one of the very few people doing PR. Representation is minimal. I mean, those numbers are out there. Also out there on the journalism front, and I can give you guys links, but representation is super, super minimal. So when you're like the only person dealing with this type of work, you stay quiet because you're going to lose your job and you are going to mess it up for everybody else that comes after you. And
that's what happened. That's what happened to the women around Weinstein. I think they didn't report him. They didn't say anything because they wanted to be an actor or an actress or a singer or a director.
Even in the office, like a lot of the people that were assistants that worked with him, we all knew. I didn't personally work with him, but I had friends that worked at that company. We all knew.
Yeah.
Everybody knew.
Yeah.
So you just stay quiet, head to the grindstone, you do your work, you don't cause trouble because you want that opportunity. You want to be the next big agent, the next big manager, you want to represent the next big actor. You want your script to be read. You want that meeting with Harvey or any of his people. And it happens even now, but not so much because it's been, men are now blacklisted. Like it's all on Twitter or on Facebook. Screenshots of conversations are happening. Just recently, somebody called me sweetheart in one conversation, trying to get me to do work for free, 7 weeks of work for free. I screenshotted that conversation. I have that email. I'm already going to report him to a couple of people, and I'm going to make sure on the down low, because I'm not going to make like a big scene because I want to work also, and I want other people to work. But just know, like, by the way, tread lightly. This guy will not pay you, and this guy is going to do this to you.
Try to sweet talk
condescending, like you can hear the tone in that text, like
exactly,
sweetheart.
Oh, sweetheart.
I
never had like I was never like physically assaulted or anything, which I'm not saying that, oh no, but I definitely had the especially in comedy where it's like you don't understand what's funny,
right?
I understand what's funny. I'm a man, I obviously am funnier, and it's like, so I feel like that, to me, that's something that I'm noticing is changing a lot more too, is I feel like the Me Too movement is not just about, and Time's Up as well, is not just about like calling out sexual harassers, but calling out men, like you were saying, who
mansplainers,
condescend, or basically like, because I feel like a lot of times like you feel like you can't say anything because you don't want to screw it. I one time had a guy tell me to my face that he paid women comedians less because they weren't as funny.
Right.
And it was like, and he had my money, so I couldn't say anything. So I was like, I know a lot of us aren't funny. And I was just like, just give me my money. So I was just like, I think that going forward, I think that is what I'm most excited. And also,
just in general, just being
sexual assault.
Yeah, in general, I think that women are becoming more of a sisterhood. It's becoming more of a sisterhood where we're discussing like, this is what you do. This is how you address certain people. This is how you manage this relationship. This is how you promote your work. I think the next step is actually going to be sharing how much money people are making. Because once you know how much people are making across the board, then you can't get underpaid. But when you don't know, it becomes like this big secret and competition, and you don't want it to be that. Like as of yesterday, the minimum wage, just went up in LA County. And of course, in all the Facebook groups for filmmakers is like, you can't pay me less than $200 now.
We know.
Yeah, so now we know.
So the internet is really helping inform the next generation. It doesn't have to be word of mouth. It can be like, oh, this is what I should be worthy of expecting. Did you want to say something, Lane?
Well, I was just gonna say to Lori's point of just like, and Anna's point of kind of like calling out that like less, not assault and not at that level, but the less stuff is like, I'm also excited for that next step because it's not unconnected. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like all of that little stuff.
Those kind of people do
allows
that.
The people
It's
that
a
do assault
microaggression.
to be like, well, it's part of the culture, and so it's like, oh, it's okay to do this. Then the line gets pushed further and further. And if we can start pulling that line back and be like, all this little stuff's not okay.
Right.
Then
And
it's
this is
easier
where
to-
men come in place, because sometimes women, unfortunately, we are not taken seriously. But if
Yeah.
a white guy goes in there and says like, this is not okay, this is not what you should say, guess what? People will listen. If a white woman says it, people will listen more so. And it just goes down the line. We need people to be listening and collaborate. And sometimes it's like, oh, this is really, really uncomfortable. It doesn't seem that way. Like my husband sometimes defended his friends, and now he's like, oh yeah, that's kind of bad.
I think what's interesting is like the most effective voice in the room can change from situation to situation. For example, it took a black man to call Bill Cosby a rapist. A white man doing it would not have worked. It needed to be Hannibal Buress, so that was
Good example.
the right voice.
That's a really good example, actually, of something like that.
And everybody knew about Bill.
Oh, that one I didn't know.
Everybody knew about him
nothing was
in
happening.
my business.
We need to wrap up.
I didn't know about Louis C.K. either.
I know.
Yeah.
I later found out.
Yeah.
Right, we're going to have to
Friends,
wrap up the show. I'm so sorry we're running out of time, but we're going to end with Facebook feed time, which comes from my good friend Rob Eisenberg, and he writes, according to a news story headline that popped up today on my page, 80-year-old actress Ally McGraw looks totally different than she did in 1970. And my favorite comment comes from Gary Shacker, who writes, is she seeing anyone right now? So I don't know if that's an appropriate question to ask. What's your status, Allie? But those Facebook posts is like, you will not believe what this person. Yeah, 40 years have passed, and so I may believe it.
You think?
I may possibly believe it.
Yeah.
All right, I want to thank you to our guests, Diane Diamond and Anna Lydia Monaco.
Yes.
Thank you, Jamie Elcroft, Lori Roggenkamp, and Etta Green. Our producer is Dina Friedman. Our production team is Francesco Demanda and Lane McFadden. Sound production is by John Maddox, and our webmaster is Bill Filipiak. Thank you. I am Louise Palanker, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.